You're listening to the Law Lives Project. I'm your host, Angie Vishianan. I'm a lawyer that launched a startup focused on changing the legal profession through mentorship. Through this podcast, we will explore the early career steps of real lawyers to help students see that many of us didn't have it all figured out at first. It takes time to find your way in the profession, so we want to shed light on some of the challenges people face in the earliest part of building their careers. Each week, I sit down with members of the legal profession and chat with them about the paths they took to get where they are now, including the times they stumbled, the times they fell, and the times they needed a little help. To encourage candor and vulnerability on this show, the attorney guests will remain nameless, but their stories will be laid bare for your consideration. This episode is sponsored by the Princeton Review. For more than 35 years, students and their families have trusted the Princeton Review to help them get into their dream schools. Their mission is to provide personalized, innovative, best-in-class private tutoring, test prep, and admission products and services to help students knock down barriers and achieve their academic goals. They are solely on the side of the students. They are not affiliated with any of the test developers. When it comes to your future, they'll cover you every step of the way. With score guarantee courses, private one-on-one tutoring, webinars, and support articles, you'll never lack the tools you need. Check them out at www.review.com or call 800-2-REVIEW. That's 800-273-8439. And save 20% on your course enrollment with promo code TPRLLP. This week, I'm sitting down with a tax attorney who found herself going to a law school that she didn't ever apply to due to some unforeseen circumstances. During law school, she believed that she would be hired by her mentor at a large law firm post-graduation, but she received some tough advice from her mentor that ultimately led her to land a job with a solo practitioner. The solo practitioner initially rejected her requests for interviews and meetings, but eventually he saw her passion and tenacity, so he hired her. And they grew their practice to be the third largest practice in their niche in the country, and eventually he invited her to be his business partner. This week's guest has a path that is anything but traditional, but I can't wait for you to hear about it, so let's jump right in. So, can you tell me, what were some of the reasons that you decided to go to law school?
Yeah, I was actually an accountant before I became an attorney, and I had never planned to become an attorney. It had never crossed my mind. It had never been an aspiration of mine. I, in high school, told my mom I wanted to be a nun because I wanted to just spend a life in service. And she said, "We're not Catholic, so you can't be a nun." So I didn't become a nun. I actually became an accountant, and I'm good at math. I had been a math tutor, and accounting seemed like a good, stable field. So I had become an accountant, and it was when I was working as an accountant that I started to see how this system, the government, really didn't help business owners. I was preparing their tax returns and recognized how difficult it was for business owners to stay compliant and juggle it all, hustle and build up their business at the same time. And nothing about accounting is explained to them when they start a business unless they seek it out on their own. So in working as an accountant, while I was doing that and researching laws for my clients or for our business, or for my employer, that's when I decided to go to law school. I thought, I want to be able to represent people and defend them and help business owners find real relief in the law.
So did you study accounting in undergrad?
Yeah, I had done MIS and accounting in undergrad.
And then how long were you working for the accounting firm before you decided to go to law school?
I actually started in accounting in 1999 while I was in college. And so I started as an accounting assistant and payroll and accounts receivable, just sort of went my way through every accounting division until even worked for a software accounting company, helping users prepare their tax returns with the software. And then I was working as an accountant for about 2.5 years when I decided to go to law school.
Okay, so how did you pick which law school to apply to?
Okay, so I had grown up in Michigan, been born and raised in Michigan, and hate the cold. And when I was graduating from undergrad, I decided to find a job as an accountant in Florida.
I'm allergic to cold too. So I understand.
Yeah, I had moved to Florida. And then when I was looking at law schools, I had really been looking at law schools in Florida because I was actually also working on my master's at the time. So when I was working as an accountant, I was also doing my master's at night, thinking I would get my CPA license. And that's when I decided, no, I really want to be able to defend people and take these business matters to tax court and whatever that looks like. So originally I was looking at law schools in Florida, and being from Michigan, I was familiar with Case Western as well as some of the schools around there. So I had applied and gotten into Case Western. I was also talking at the time, dating my now ex-husband, who's from Oklahoma, and he had a residency in Oklahoma. So I was set to go to Case Western for law school. And the month law school was starting, a friend of ours, her husband drowned in a lake during a church picnic. Yeah, saving two little girls who were drowning, and then he drowned and passed away. And I had been married for about a month, maybe 2 months when that happened, and my husband then was going to be in Oklahoma for his residency, and I was packed up and ready to go to Case Western in Ohio, and just decided time is valuable and begged Oklahoma City University School of Law to let me in at the last second for that class that was starting like in a week or so. And I actually think it was July when I went up to the law school. It's a commuter law school in Oklahoma City. There's about 3 in Oklahoma. And they said, this is not how it works. But I explained to them, and they saw I was already accepted to another law school, and explained why I wanted to be in Oklahoma City and that I just didn't want to be in another state for the next 3 years. And
so you had not even applied to that school. Okay.
And even like the day of, they just kept saying, well, we'll let you know. We'll let you know. The day before orientation, they said, well, just come to orientation, but we'll let you know. After orientation, they said, well, school starts Monday, so just come here on Monday and we'll let you know. And I showed up 8 a.m. Monday, and they said, your first class is torts at 9 a.m. downstairs. Okay, here's my schedule. And I don't have any books, nor have I read any of the cases for any of my classes today. I was woefully unprepared, to say the least.
What were a few things that you wish you knew before you started law school?
Oh my gosh, the list is endless, right? I would say in hindsight, I didn't realize you should probably go to law school in the state you want to practice in. Well, unless you want to hang your own shingle. And so, there's the tiers of law schools, which I didn't realize, but I think that the tiers of law school have less weight than just getting a law degree, because it's sort of like becoming a doctor. The public doesn't generally ask where you got your degree from, or even if you're board certified.
I totally agree. I think that, if you're planning to start your own law firm and hang a shingle, as you say, it doesn't matter as much where you go to law school, other than, if you plan to practice in a specific jurisdiction, you probably want to go there because that's where most of your clients will be, and you'll need that to generate business. If you do decide to go to a large law firm, though, they will care about where you go to law school, what rank you were, what grades you got.
So, I had no concept of the tiers of law school. I didn't appreciate the value of that. But the reason I say more important than that is going to a law school in the state you want to practice in is just because the relationships you build in law school are invaluable. Those will be potentially, for me, they've been lifelong friendships, lifelong referrals, lifelong relationships. And then the clients that you'll build up are in that state that potentially you're in law school at. And the employment opportunities, you'll likely encounter those individuals while you're in law school, or those firms or attorneys. And I think that's invaluable.
What extracurricular activities did you participate in while you were in law school?
Okay, so if you realize I had no plans to go to law school, and now I'm in a state that a month before law school started, I had no plans on being in. And I didn't know anyone. I didn't frankly know. I knew one attorney from Michigan only because it was my sister's husband's aunt's husband. It's so far removed. And I had never, growing up, I had never asked him anything about practicing law. So I just felt so behind the curve when starting law school, let alone not having purchased my books. So I got to work networking and I ran for class president immediately the month after law school started and became my class president and got to know everyone in all the sections of my law school and the entire school. I then became secretary and then chair of something called the Law Students Division of the Oklahoma Bar Association, which is the liaison organization between the 3 law schools in the state. Kind of on the same premise. I want to get to know all the law students in the entire state and get to know attorneys throughout the state who could have gone to any of these law schools that I didn't know about. And I was, secretary and some other positions and some, Phi Alpha Delta and some other things in law school. But I didn't do moot court. I didn't do law review. I was looking for how to focus my attention on networking opportunities. And I utilized every position I was in to create networking opportunities for myself. So when I was law school class president, I created a lunch with a lawyer program for lawyers where the law school would pay for a lunch and law students in small groups of 10. And I attended all of them, got to meet attorneys in all these different practice areas and ask them questions. So I definitely was focused in what I was trying to accomplish with my time.
And what jobs and internships and activities did you do between 1L year and 2L year?
Between my 1L year and 2L year, I worked for a solo practitioner that summer. I just wanted to have some exposure to pleadings and just a very traditional firm and traditional practice. I had been in the accounting world, which was very different.
What practice area was that for?
He was a PI attorney.
Personal injury?
Mm-hmm, personal injury, yeah. Sorry.
Okay.
He was a personal injury attorney, very established, had graduated law school, I want to say in the 60s. It was an eye-opener. His internship was, and I still love him to this day, he did not, he abhorred computers. And this was like in 2006, hand wrote all of his pleadings, or he would say his pleadings, what he wanted to write out loud, and I would write them. And then he'd want me to type it and print it out and give it to him. And then he'd edit it by hand and then give it back to me. So it was a lot of that, running down to the courthouse, a lot of just typing up pleadings and filing them and attending court and bringing exhibits. But by the end of that first summer, I had learned civil procedure just through that internship, such that civil procedure, the class, the next year was a breeze.
And do you remember how you applied for that position? Did you see it on a job board or in the newspaper, or where did you find it?
Our school had an online career job posting section. I can't remember what it is now.
Got it. And what about the summer between your 2L and 3L?
Yeah, so my 2L, 3L year, during that year, I had done 2 externships, one for the public defender's office. I wanted to understand how you defend people who had been accused of heinous crimes. And so I got to work with a number of capital punishment cases, really heartbreaking cases. I wanted to understand, how do you get in the mind of those attorneys? Because I still couldn't understand, as even accepting everyone deserves the best defense. I wanted to understand, how do you have those conversations with these individuals who agree that, they did this, but you now have to defend them and try to mitigate what their sentence is or whatever that looks like. That was actually great. It's an externship I still look back at and think, I'm so glad that I did something that was not in my wheelhouse or that I was planning on practicing, just so I could understand it. I feel like it's enriched my own practice area, because I don't love every client I have. I mean, I want to help every business owner, but every person I meet isn't exactly somebody I would have hung out with or been drawn to. And so I think that was really valuable, to understand how you defend every single client, even when you may not understand them at first blush.
Okay, so that was an externship though. So that was during the school year.
Yes. And I did another one with the mayor's office, which ended up being extremely fruitful that year. And then 2L, 3L year, I worked for a general practice boutique firm.
During the summer?
During the summer.
And how many attorneys would you say were in the general practice boutique?
5, 6.
And what types of work did you get to do for that firm?
Yeah, so that firm, they did a little bit of everything. They did employment law, family law, contracts, and everybody would have me do different things for them. Family lawyers would have me look up custody schedules or get documents from clients. I saw some ugly bitter fights go back and forth between opposing counsel and the firm I was interning for. Employment law, this attorney had me look up updates to Department of Labor standards for a specific case. The contracts attorney had me. It's funny because I still refer to all these attorneys, and they're no longer together at this firm. They're in their own practices. But like that family law attorney, I just saw her last week, and we were talking about a case that I could send to her. The contracts attorney, oh gosh, I probably worked with him the most. He had me research things. He had me research a number of things. He had me read what he had written. He had me edit or revise what he had written. He had me write some letters to clients. He had me schedule meetings with clients. I probably worked with him the most. And this was one of the most helpful things about that practice. And my experience with him is that he gave me a template for just about every pleading to keep for my own and to use in the future if I ever needed it. So that was really kind and helpful and useful.
That's amazing. Were there any other experiences or connections or other factors that helped you obtain your first position after law school?
Yeah, I would say actually the best piece of advice that I got in law school was I had a law school mentor, and he was the founding partner of one of Oklahoma City's largest law firms, one of the 3 largest law firms in Oklahoma City. And he was my mentor in law school. And I thought for sure I had taken 2 of his classes. He had loved me in his class. He told me at one point that he had handpicked me to mentor me. And I thought for sure he's going to hire me for his firm. And so when I was at 3L, he told me he wanted to meet to talk about what my plans were after law school. And I was very excited. And I sent him my transcripts. And the meeting did not go as I thought, because I thought it was just going to be an offer to join his firm or asking me what I thought about joining his firm, which is a very prestigious firm in Oklahoma City. And instead, he started the meeting by telling me his own experience when he came out of law school and how he had moved to Oklahoma, and he wasn't from Oklahoma like me, how nobody would hire him, and that he saw a lot of similar qualities in me as himself. And he wanted to encourage me to try to find a 2 or 3 person practice, 1, 2, or 3, no more than 3 person practice to join. And I was crushed when he said that, because 1, I had never planned on becoming an attorney, but once I'd gone to law school, all I knew and understood in creating a goal for myself was, okay, the goal is to get to a big law firm and have these incredible billable hours and to, work your tail off. That seemed to be what the end goal is for everybody. And so to hear this prestigious founding partner at this firm, who I had thought the meeting was going to be for me to join his firm, tell me he saw a lot of talent in me and wanted to encourage me to join a 1 or 2 or no more than 3 person firm, felt very deflating. Very deflating to me. And I just said, oh, why? Don't you want me to join your firm? And he said, I can make you an offer to join my firm, but they're going to have you scanning and doing a bunch of garbage work. And I can tell you're going to do it for the next 5 years. And I just see a lot of spunk in you. And I know your entrepreneurial mind, you could really, if you joined a solo practitioner, you could double, triple his business. And you should just tell him that and tell him your vision and tell him your background and then prove it. And he said, that's what I did. And he said, I didn't get paid for, I can't remember the amount of time now. I want to say it was a year he worked at the firm he had joined initially, where he had begged them for a job and they didn't want to hire him, and they didn't pay him, and he just worked. And then they ended up paying him, hiring him, the whole 9. And so when I came out that was the best advice I could have ever gotten. Sometimes I think, what if I had gone to Case Western? I never would have gotten that piece of advice from this mentor. And if I had never gotten that piece of advice from that mentor, I probably never would have pounded on my business partner's door. At that time, he wasn't my business partner. He was a solo practitioner who I thought was the best tax attorney. And I told him that, and I told him I had a vision for his business and exactly what my mentor had said. And I did. And the attorney didn't want to hire any attorneys. He emailed me back and said, I'm not interested. And I emailed him back and said, I would love the opportunity to interview. It went back and forth 8 times. Before he finally The truth is, he finally interviewed me. He had his receptionist schedule an interview with me just to get rid of me. And I knew it too, because I was just kept persisting. Nobody does that. Then I met with him and said, I'd never planned to be a lawyer. I'm not a lawyer. I'm a very non-traditional lawyer, but I want to help business owners. And here's why I want to do this. And here's why I want to join you. And his version is he was so mad that he liked me. And he hired me, and we grew it to be one of the largest practices in our specific niche in the country, one of the third largest in the country.
Well, my goodness. Once you got there, how did you know that you were going to have a future there? Did you know? Did you feel like every day was a possible day he was going to fire you? Or did you feel like you had this vision and you followed it through to the end?
I think throughout my life, I've just had to have a great deal of confidence at every stage. I'm going to say that at every single stage, a greater deal of confidence than maybe I have in myself, just to kind of will things into existence. Because I've always been, when I started law school, I felt like the underdog. And I probably studied as much as I could and networked as much as I could, just because I felt like I was so behind the curve. And if you were to ask anyone in my law school now, they'd say, oh my gosh, you were just everyone now says you were just sprinting so far ahead of everybody. But I thought I was just constantly behind everyone. And I would say, same thing. And when I joined his firm, I knew he had not even wanted to interview me. And I did eventually say, why did you hire me? Because I don't know how. I don't know why he hired me. I just thought, it's a blessing from God that he hired me. And as soon as I joined the firm, I was sprinting. I thought I was behind the curve again. And unbeknownst to me, he was really impressed and had never had anybody say, I want to help you build your firm. I think what you're doing is incredible work, and I see a lot of potential and opportunity for growth. Nobody had ever shared the vision he kept in his own mind.
This episode is sponsored by the authors of #Networked, a new book written by me and 19 amazing women lawyers who I met on LinkedIn. During the early days of the COVID-19 pandemic, many of us were facing uncertainty in our lives and businesses. We went searching for support and community. We took to social media, and lo and behold, we found our soul sisters on LinkedIn. Who would have thought? I used to think LinkedIn was a glorified resume platform, but it's become so much more. Our group of lady lawyers grew to over 50 women. We laughed together, cried together, shared in losses and successes, and cheered each other on while we juggled practicing law, parenting, relationships, launching new companies, building online courses, side hustles, main hustles, podcasts, and more. 20 of us got together and self-published a book to share our stories about the early days of the pandemic, and we hope that it'll show others that you can find community even in the darkest of times. If you're searching for support or inspiration, please check out our book and read our stories. It's now available on Amazon in both Kindle and paperback editions. Just go to tinyurl.com/networkedbook. That's networked with an ED on the end. Thank you to all of my co-authors for dreaming up this beautiful project and bringing it to life through sheer force of will and determination. And now, back to the episode. And so what is the practice areas that you focus on?
Both myself and my now business partner. He made me a partner with him. There's no such thing as a partnership track at his firm, at the firm. We have over 100 employees now in 6 states, but even I was surprised when he asked me to be his partner 5 years ago. But we practiced tax law. He was an accountant before he became an attorney, as was I. And we just do tax law, and we have developed a full service accounting firm over the years. So we've had that practice for about 8 years as well.
And do you think you chose the right practice area? Because it seemed like you dabbled a lot in lots of different things in law school.
Because I've been an accountant, and because I had, all these years of experience in tax law, in law school, I didn't even take income tax. the course, because at that point, I'd prepared hundreds of federal, state, individual, business tax returns. I'd answered thousands of questions from users of tax software. So I didn't feel like I needed a specific tax experience. Anything I was going to need to know, I could learn. I did want to have a more fuller understanding of some other areas of law that might intersect what I was going to practice, or like civil procedure, which was going to be so different from administrative law, or like the public defender's office. I wanted to intentionally expose myself to things like interning at the mayor's office, administrative law, and how government operates from the inside. It was going to be important exposure for me because I knew I'd spend the rest of my practice in tax law.
And as a junior attorney, what types of things did you do? How much did he trust you with?
Yeah. So first day, my very, very first day, I negotiated a payment agreement for a client. And that honestly just had to do with, one, my own knowledge, but two, my own initiative. So what he had me do before I started was just review cases that he had and review things that he was going to ask me questions on. So on the first day I started, he had me calling the IRS and just doing some basic work. And from one of the cases that he had given me, I knew that they were ready to negotiate a just very straightforward monthly payment. And I said, do you mind if I just call the IRS and get this negotiated? And he was surprised that I even knew to do that, or that was possible, and that I already understood the area of law. I mean, I understood it at a basic level even before going to law school. So I brought that into the practice with me. And so he was impressed that I was willing to take that off his plate and call the IRS. And working with him, there hasn't been a day where he said, well, you've never done this before, and I have responded in fear. First meeting with a revenue officer ever. I think it was my first month working, and he gave me this huge file, and there were 3 employees and an intern. And there was a meeting with a revenue officer, but some kind of conflict for the only other attorney besides me. And I mean, the whole first month was hilarious to me, considering I knew he didn't even want to hire me. He had said it multiple times via email. He wasn't interested. And so sure enough, I'm practicing and working for him. And in that first month, he has a conflict that he needs an attorney on hand. He says, well, can you go meet with this revenue officer? I know you have never done this before, and they have to do an asset viewing of this business and all their assets. And I can walk you through it. I don't have a lot of time. And I just took the file and I'm like, I'll figure it out. I'll teach myself while I drive there. And it was like a 2-hour drive. So I listened to a lot of stuff on YouTube very quickly while I drove to this distant town to do an asset viewing. But one, I understood valuations enough, but I don't get scared easily.
Yeah, I think that's a very important thing to talk about, is that early in your practice, it can be very scary to make that leap from law school into practicing, where you're now on the hook for real clients, you're doing real work. And for many people, that's very, very scary. And you want to say, oh, I've never done that before, and I can't do that, and I need your help, and I need somebody who's more experienced to be on these things. But I think the really, really great attorneys are ones that embrace that and just say, you know what, of course I'm going to be scared, but I've just got to muster through and develop the courage and take this bull by the horns and wrestle it down. And I think it's a key skill that many law students don't have coming out of law school. They don't understand that they have to be resourceful and find ways to make it happen, especially if you go and work at very large firms, because they may have very extensive training programs. And your mentor was right. If you go to a very large law firm, they may have you in the basement scanning things and doing research for the first 5 years of your practice. You may not even ever smell a client. So I think it's really important to note that depending on the kind of firm that you find yourself at, the kind of organization that you find yourself at, you may get more substantive experience early on in your career if you're with a smaller firm where they don't have a very deep bench. They need people who can just take it on. And at a larger firm where you have so many layers of hierarchy, you may not have the same opportunities to do real meaningful work right away.
I do think that's so important to not be scared, and having, I don't know how many people over the years. I think that's just a skill you can't teach. You can't teach someone to get over their own fear.
So, what types of clients do you mostly work with? Is it individuals, small businesses, large businesses?
It's a mix. Our clients typically are in some kind of tussle with the IRS or the state. So typically business owners, but a lot of self-employed individuals, and then a sprinkle of individuals, getting audited or having some kind of other dilemma that they just need someone to negotiate on their behalf. But primarily business owners and self-employed individuals is who I find needs my help the most.
And early on in your career, how much of your time did you spend interacting with clients?
Early on, I spent a significant amount of time interacting with clients, much more than I do now, mainly because, one of the problems that I think every law firm faces is clients wanting, especially now, instantaneous communication, and communication being the biggest drag on the practice, immediate responses to emails, immediate responses to phone calls and messages and all sorts of communication methods. And I was that buffer. My first several years of practice was communicating with clients, getting them updates, figuring out the status. And even as more attorneys were added to the practice, it was still communicating with clients was the gap that was always trying to be filled and improved. And then, number two complaint of any client in any practice is this is taking too long. So trying to communicate with clients on what the timeline is and get them updated on why it is taking long. Dealing with the government is never going to be quick, and this problem was created over time. But I would say, initially I can't think what the percentage of communicating with clients was versus doing the actual work, but definitely more than 50% of my time was spent communicating or emailing clients.
And how much of your practice is transactional versus litigation?
The majority of our work is transactional in that we're negotiating with all sorts of administrative levels of the IRS. Tax court only comes to any given city. So Oklahoma City, for example, or Oklahoma, they only come to Oklahoma City twice a year, every single year. They come twice a year, once in the fall, once in the spring. And those dockets are tax court. That's probably one of those areas that people don't understand this practice area. And so if you have a trial set on the trial docket for the fall docket, it might be 30 minutes. That's it. That's, you might have a 15-minute trial and you could show up after waiting 2 years to get on the trial docket, only for the IRS to ask for a continuance and the judge to grant it. And now you're on the next year's docket. So it's this incredibly extended timeline. And because of that, it actually benefits our clients to negotiate far before we need to apply to tax court. So a lot of it's negotiating with IRS agents and revenue officers and all sorts of administrative levels.
What are some of the best things about your job?
Well, definitely the top of that list is if you were to go back to my nun story and just wanting to figure out how I could serve, that I would say has come full circle now. When I decided to go to law school, I did not anticipate or have any idea how dire these situations are that these business owners are in. I could write a book of the ways people have told me they thought they were going to commit suicide because they just wanted to escape their tax problems and the nightmare that has been for them. And I've had a wife throw her wedding ring at me when I told her that what her husband had hired us for. So getting to take that incredible level of pain that I really did not know existed in so many businesses, and then turn it around. I was just speaking to some commercial realtors yesterday, and a gentleman on that speaking engagement just volunteered that he had been a client that we had helped him, and that we just completely turned around his business, and he was just so grateful. And it really is, as cliche as it sounds, and I know, I went to law school to help people is worst answer ever. But we really do get to take awful situations and turn them around and show people there's hope at the end of this and give them hope and help them start over. There couldn't be anything better than that.
That's awesome. What are some of the worst things about your job?
Oh gosh. Okay. Two of the worst is that no matter how much you communicate, it's never enough. No matter how many emails, how many 2-hour conversations you have with a client, how many meetings, I'm as frustrated as clients with how long the process takes from start to finish for a client. And I understand their frustration. I mean, the length of time it takes to resolve something for someone who loves instant gratification as much as the next person, there's nothing I can do about it. And I think that's frustrating, is there's just nothing I can do about it. And I hate that I don't have an answer aside from that for clients.
And what's some advice that you have for law students that might want to follow in your career path?
Yeah. Actually, okay, so I would say several things. One, I think my career path itself is highly unusual. It is unique, but the takeaways that I think that apply to anybody and any practice area would be, I don't think there's anything greater that an employee, an attorney could demonstrate than incredibly high level of integrity and small responsibilities and big responsibilities. One small example is when I was working for the solo practitioner, it was him, me, a receptionist, an accountant, an intern, and a case manager. So it was just a teeny tiny little office and lots of casework to shoulder. But I remember there was a day, and I had a baby who I had in daycare. And I remember there was a day I had to make a copy of something and thought, I could just make a copy at the copy machine. I could just, while I'm copying some other stuff, just make a quick copy of this thing for the daycare. And I thought to myself, no, it's stealing. I should just go ask the attorney when he gets back if I can make a copy of this thing. And I did. And he was just floored that I even asked him. He's like, yeah, of course. And then after that day, after work, I was still in the office, and he said, I can't believe you asked me if you could make a copy of that. And I said, it's your ink, it's your printer, it's your copier. And he said, people make copies all the time of personal stuff. And you're right, it is the firm's. And I appreciate you asking me if you could make a copy of this thing instead of just doing it. And there was a mistake I made where a bonus I had gotten had been calculated wrong for 3 months. And it was my fault. I had missed expenses that I was supposed to catch, and it would have reduced my bonus substantially. And in the 3rd month, when I realized it, I brought it to the attention of the attorney and said, I really hate to tell you this, but I screwed up. You overpaid me for 3 months. And he was like, I never was going to catch that. And I said, I know, but it's wrong. And I needed to tell you. And I think it's all those little things along the way that, like I said, there's no partnership track at our firm, but I think there's nothing that sets your soul more at ease than integrity, and that enables you to set yourself apart than an incredibly high level of integrity.
Thank you so much for that. I think your story is just very, very powerful. And I know that our listeners will really appreciate hearing all of these candid pieces of advice. So thank you so much for your time today. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much.
All right, everyone. That's it for today. Thank you to our guest speaker, and thank you to all of you for listening to another episode of the Law Lives Project. If you're a prospective law student that's interested in speaking with attorneys one-on-one, check out leguplegal.com. Legup Legal is an online mentoring platform that connects prospective law students with attorney mentors. Sign up for a membership today to learn more about the practice of law and see if it's a good fit for you. If you enjoyed this episode, I would appreciate it if you left a review on iTunes or any other platform that you're listening on. If you have any questions or comments about anything you heard on the podcast, or if you have ideas for guest speakers, please contact me by emailing me and my team at info@leguplegal.com. Thanks again, and don't forget to tune in next week.